Today's daf is daf Mem Ches. Let's just quickly read the Mishnah again, the first part of the Mishnah on daf Mem Zayin Omid Beis. Hareini Olecha Cherem, and we're going to see that the Madir here is Me'anshe Golil, that Cherem means, Kodshim means Bedek HaBayis. Hamudar Osir, the Mudar is not allowed to have Hanoah from the Madir. And if he says Harei at olai cherem, then hanoder osir. Then he has accepted upon himself an iser hano from his friend. He, Reuven, will not have any benefits from his friend Shimon. If he says Hareini olecha v'at olai in both directions, shnei masurim, each one is enjoined from having hano one from the other. Shneim Mutarim b'davar shel olei bavel. And in our daf today, Mem Ches, we're going to see what is davar shel olei bavel. But the basic principle is that davar shel olei bavel does not have any private ownership. It's hefker for everyone to use, and therefore no one is benefiting from his friend. And now we begin today's daf, which we began at the end of yesterday's shir, V'asurim b'davar shel osayir. However, with regard to a list, which we're going to see immediately, of dvarim shel osayir, there each person has a shutfis, has his own bailus in the dvarim shel osayir, and therefore each one, the madir and the mudar, is violating hanoah by getting hanoah from the other one. Eizeh davar shel olei bavel. What is the list of those items that belong to no one, that basically hefkel hakol, kigon, harabayis, hazoros, habor sheba emsa derech, when the olei hagola used to come from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, they used to have these boros which would collect water, cisterns of water, and they were hefker for all the olei regel. So in this case, there's a hefker situation rather than a shutfa situation, and therefore no one is violating the iser hanoah by having hanoah from his friend. But where do we have shutfis? Kigon har chava, right? That there was an area outside the Beis HaKnesses, and possibly also in the marketplaces. Vamerchatz, and there was a public bathhouse, Beis HaKnesses, which is owned by everyone. Every one of the members of the city has bailus in the Beis HaKnesses. Adam in a shuk, another person who's not part of the city, and his forefathers did not have a chelik in that Beis HaKnesses, he couldn't possibly generate an iser on anyone else regarding the Beis HaKnesses. But those who are members of the city, and they therefore have shutfis in the Beis HaKnesses, they can generate an iser one on the other to the Beis HaKnesses, which, by the way, puts us in a very strange situation that you could have such a balagan that each one is madir his friend, and because they all have shutfis, no one is going to end up using the Beis HaKnesses. And then we have the teva, which was moved around in the Gemara and Tainis from place to place when they read the Sefer Torah publicly, Vasfarim, the Sefer Torah, which are owned by the Bnei Ha'ir in Shutfis. In all these cases, both Reuven and Shimon are Asur Ba'anoah because each one was mad to the other one, and vice versa. And they're being Nena Mishal Chaver because of the Shutfis. In fact, I'll just mention here in passing the Gemara in Baba Basra that establishes that if two members of the city would testify about so-and-so that he stole the Sefer Torah, they would be posel yedus. As long as they are members of the city, they are shutfim in the Sefer Torah, and therefore they're testifying about their own Sefer Torah, which is a psul in edus called a baldover or noger b'yedus. However, if they would be masalik themselves and remove their ownership, then they could testify against the so-called accused Gazlan. In our case in Nedarim, in order for the madir to be matir the mudar, then perhaps he would have to be mesalik himself from ownership. But then that gets back into the other sugi that we learned yesterday about whether a neder, once it's chal, based on bailus, would it terminate and no longer be binding after the bailus terminates. The Mishnah continues, Vakosev chelko l'nasi. A person, through a kinyan, could hand over his bailus, even though he's a member of that city, to the nasi. And then he's no longer bailim, he's no longer shutfim, and his friend could now benefit from any of those items that are owned jointly in partnership by the Bnei Ha'ir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, let's go one step further and apply this logic. Echad hakosev l'nasi, v'echad hakosev lehejot. Whether he gives up his private partnership ownership by writing a shtar to the nasi and transferring his ownership to the nasi, or he writes a shtar to a hejot, the din is always the same. He has transferred his chelek to someone else, and therefore the mudar is no longer aser ba'anoah. Ma bein kosev l'nasi l'kosev l'hejot. So then the question only is, why then does the Tanna Kama mention and single out kosev l'nasi? What's the significance here of nasi? And the Mishnah answers this question by saying, Ein tzarich l'zakos, that the difference between kosev l'nasi and kosev l'hejot is whether or not you need an actual zechia, a shlichus of sorts, in order to effectuate that kinyan. In the case of a nasi, we don't need anyone to serve as the middleman and be zocher in the chelik of Ruven in the Dvarim Shalosh Seir on behalf of the nasi. Masha Einkein, in contrast, with regard to a hejot, the makabel has to have someone being zoch on his behalf. There's going to have to be a kinyan, and it's going to operate through zoch and the adam. And ksiv itself is not sufficient. Now, why is it that in the case of a nasi, ksiv itself is sufficient without a kinyan? And we have here the Ran and Rabbeinu Avram min Ahar and the Meiri. The Ran writes, Yofa Koach HaNasi. It's a new principle called Koach HaNasi. Other Rishonim say Kvodo Shel Nasi. They made a regular takana of Hefker Bez and Hefker to allow the Nasi to be Zoch without a kinyan. Rabbi Avram ben Ahar says it's a davar shebemamon, and that's why Hefker Bez and Hefker kicks in here. And the Nasi is the one who oversees the city and all its municipal functions as the Bezdin, who is able to be mafkia mamon. The Meiri writes that kol echad mem asur lehenos michalko sheraver b'chelko nidon kehefker al yidei shebaylav nistalik mimenu. He says that the Bailim could be mesalik themselves from their ownership in the communal Dvarim Shel Ha'ir. And the difference between the Hejot and the Nasi is that the Hejot is not able to be Zochem in a Hefker without a Kinyan. So he needs someone to be Kona on his behalf. But the Nasi can be Zochem Hefker without a Kinyan. So it means the siluk of Ruvain makes it as if his chelik, Ruvain's chelik, is hefker. Now the nasi can be zocha with hefker without a kinyan, because dvarim shein lehem bailim would automatically be shayach to the Moshel Ha'ir, and the Nasi is the Moshel Ha'ir. Chachamim Omrim, Echad Ze v'Echad Ze tzrichim l'zakos. The Chachamim reject Rabbi Yehuda's premise that with regard to the Nasi, he doesn't need a kinyan. So then the question becomes, why was the Nasi singled out? When the Tanakhama mentions the Chelek HaNasi, that you write a Chelek to the Nasi, that's the Derech HaOlam. That's the normal way of doing things. A person is afraid to write Nechasim to his friend because maybe afterwards his friend would generate an Isur Neder on him and he won't be able to use his Nechasim. But in the case of a Nasi, there's no Chash. Ein darko lesor hana al habrios. It's not the usual for the Nasi to take some sort of a neder. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ein anshe golel tzrichen lichtov. This is a pella of a chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda. That in the case of anshe golil, and this is a little bit of lashon hara about the anshe golil, they don't even have to bother with this whole system of writing the nechasim to the nasi in order to be matir hanoah. No. For Kosvav will say it. Already in previous generations, earlier doros, with regard to the Anshe HaGolil, they already gave over their chelek to the nasi, so that in subsequent generations there was no Yerusha on the chelek of the ear. It was already transferred over to the nasi by the great-great-grandparents, al Yideyim, for the sake of their children. And all this was because in Anshe Gol, apparently they got angry quickly, they were hot-tempered, and they would take a shvuah and a neder, and they were rugil in those kinds of nedarim. And therefore, the Avoseim wanted to guarantee that there would be no violation of these nedarim. So what they did was they were mafkir their chelek in the Dvarim Shel Ha'ir. And that ends the Mishnah. Now the Gemara asks, Amai Mitzar. The Gemara wants to know, why is the Mudar Asur in a case where the Madir gave over his chelek to the Nasi, and we said that the Madir doesn't have a chelek in those Dvarim Shel Ha'ir, like the Rechav, the Merchatz, etc. So that the implication is that the one who writes his Bailus over to the Nasi is included in the Dvarim Hasurim. And the Gemara says, why in general is the Mudar Asur? And the Gemara right now doesn't understand the Mishnah the way we understood it. We understand it like Rav Sheshes. Some Rav Sheshes Hachi Katani, Ma Takanosam. It only means to tell you that we need to write it to the Nasi in order to make a takon, in order to allow the Mudar to have Hana. Is Yichtavu Chelkon L'Nasi. So the Gemara in the Havamina before Rav Sheshes understood that when the Madir transfers his chelik to the Nasi, the Mudar becomes awesome. And that didn't make any sense because the Madir no longer has a chelik. And how could he prohibit something that's not his onto his friend? So Rav Sheshes says, no. On the contrary, by being Masalik himself and transferring ownership, giving over his partnership rights to the Nasi, then the Mudar Hana is mutar. Now the Mishnah quotes Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ein anshe golil tzrichim l'zako shekvar zoko avoseim al yedei. Tanya, we went in the Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, anshe golil kantronim hoyu. They were balei kas. They got angry. They were always involved in confrontations, one with the other. It was quite common for them to take a neder to be matir hanoah zemizeh out of the anger. Amdu avoseyem, and here Tosfos says that avoseyem is a reference to the Roshe Bote Avos, and V'kosvu Chelkeim Linosim. Somehow they forced the people of Galil to write over all their partnership rights in the Dvarim Shala'ir to the Nasim. And now we're up to the Mishnah here in the middle of Daf Memches. What do we do in a case where Reuven was Madir Shimon, and now Reuven was supporting Shimon, and now Shimon has no means to support himself? Is there a way of circumventing this Isur Neder? Is nosno li acher l'shumatona. He, the Madir, could give all his properties over to someone else as a matana, or at least the food that he wants to feed the Mudar Anah. V'allah mutar, but then the Mudar Anah is mutar. So obviously this Mishnah validates the matana, the gift of the Madir to someone else who receives food as a gift in order to feed the Mudar Anah. And we're going to have now what's called a Maisa Listar. We're going to have a story recorded here in the Mishnah, which seems to contradict exactly what we just said in the opening principle in the Mishnah. Maisa V'echad V'beis Charan Shaya Aviv Noder Imenu Anah. So there's, let's say, Yaakov is the grandfather. Reuven is the father of Chanoch. Chanoch is getting married, and Yaakov cannot participate in the su'uda of that marriage ceremony because he's Mudar Hana. Hayamasi es beno, Reuven is marrying off his son Chanoch, and he very much wants his father, meaning Yaakov, the grandfather, to be mishtatef in the Sudas Nesuin. So Amar Lechavero, what does Reuven say to his friend? Chatzer, that courtyard where we're going to have the Sudas Nesuin, V'asu'uda, and the food of the Sudas Nesuin, Nesunim Hinam, Lifanech. They're all given to you as a matana. But he adds the following explanation. Why am I giving you the whole Gansa Chatzer with the Suda as a matana? Kidei, El Kidei, Shiyavo Abba, V'yochel Imana B'Suda. In other words, I want to allow my father, we call him Yaakov, to come and enjoy the benefits of the Suda, and he doesn't violate an Isur Neder. Why? Because he's being netted from you and not from me. So would this matana be valid? So now, this Chaver, will call him Shimon. Shimon now tests Reuven to see if Reuven's really serious about this matana. He says to him the following: Im Shaliyim, if you're telling me that I own the Chotzer and the Suda, Harei Mukdash L'Shmaim, I want to make him declare that them Hegdish. Now they'll be also enough for everybody. Omar Lo, then also he says, wait a second, why am I giving you this matana? Now, Sati L'cha Es will add the words Chotzer v'Hasuda, Kidesha Takdishem Shlashamayim. Did I give it to you so that you'll be Magdish then? I said explicitly that the reason I'm giving it to you is Kidesha Yovo Abba. Omar Lo, so the Makabel says, Nasata Li Es, again we'll add Chotzer v'Suda, Shelcha, Elo Shetehei Atov Avicha Ochlim V'Shosim, so that your father could join and be participate in the Sudas Nesuin and Misratzim Zelozeh, but really, this is an Achila Asura because he's Mudar B'Anah. Because you never meant a serious matana. There was no Gmir Stasia for a matana. Harai, you don't even let me be Magdish. Is Ye Oven Toli B'Rosham. He's talking about himself in third person. And he says now the Avera, when your father eats at that Suda, is really being caused by me. I'm violating Liftei Iver. I'm being machshel your father. Because I'm Ke'ilu participating in this facade of a kinyan, of a matana, that's not real. If a person gives a gift and the recipient doesn't even have the rights, the ability to be magdish it, it's not a matana. It proves that it's not serious. A matana has to be given with kmiris das. The Ran has a slightly different girsa, but it means the same thing. Kol matana she'ena she'mekdisha ena mekdesh she'ena matana. So the Gemara asks, our kasha masa lista. You opened up the Mishnah by telling you that if this guy who's mutar ano has nothing to eat, then give it to someone else so that he can eat from someone else. And now you bring a ma'isa that doesn't allow that. The Gemara answers, chisuri mechzer v'hachi ktani. Let's rewrite the Mishnah. The Mishnah says the following: if we see that he's not serious about this matana, he doesn't have a kavanah and intention to give it as a complete matana, also, then the mutar is not allowed to have benefit from it. That we see in the Maisa Beis Charan that the Makabel proves, look, you're not letting me be Magdish, you only did this in order to allow your father to eat. That's not a serious matana, and the Mishnah rejects this matana, invalidates it, and insists that the Mudar Hanoah, meaning the grandfather, we call him Yaakov, is still us. Omar Rav. Now we're about to learn two Lashonos, alternative versions of Rava. In both, Rava is limiting the statement of the Mishnah in the Maisa Beis Charan that the Matan is not valid. Lo Shanu, according to the first lishon of Rava, Eladi Amar Le, he said the following words when he was giving a Matana. This is the Madir. Vehinon lefanecha ela kidei sheyavo abba. I'm only giving this to you in order that my father could participate in the Su'udah. That indicates clearly that he's putting a Tanai, and he's saying, my Tanai is that this Matana could only be valid if you allow my father to eat from the Su'udah, but not if you try to exercise any sort of ownership rights. But what happens if the Nosei Matana, the Madir, didn't say explicitly a Tanai, but rather he says, Sheyu lefanecha sheyavo abba. In other words, it's yours. I'm giving to you as a gift, the chatzah, the suda, the whole 9 yards. But my purpose is that my father should be able to come to the suda. That's my purpose. But he didn't make an explicit tanai. He says to the Makab Matana, it's up to you. The ball is going to be in your court. You now are receiving Matana. It's absolutely yours. You decide if you want to invite my father to the Suda. So since it's all totally in the Ratzon of the Makabel, that indicates that the Matana is a serious, valid Matana. The Ran points out that we have a similar Gemara in Beitza and Daf Chaf. Somebody commands that they give 400 zuz, an awesome sum, to so-and-so, so that he will marry my daughter. And Rav Papa paskins that he's got to give him the 400 zuz, and nevertheless, the guy doesn't have to marry his daughter. It's up to him. So even though the Nosein said that I'm giving you this gift of 400 zuz for the reason, the motivation that I want you to marry my daughter, that's why I'm giving you this money. Nevertheless, he did not use a language of Tanai, and therefore the Matana is absolutely valid without any conditions. However, Lishnachrina, Amrina, we had a different Lashon in Rav. Amarava, lo tema time at the Amarle, Vehinach Lifanecha Hudiasur, Aval Amarle Hain Lifanecha Shiavo Amu Yocha. Mutter, Elafilu Amarle Hain Lifanecha Yovo Abba Vyochal. Asur, even if he didn't make it tonight, and he didn't say explicitly that Hain Lifanecha B'Tanai Shiavo Abba Vyochal, he only said, you know what? Yovo Abba Vyochal. Invite my father to eat from the Suda. Nevertheless, there's an Isam with about Noah, and the grandfather is not allowed to eat from the Suda, and the Neder is binding. the matana is not valid. My timer, after all, this Reuven, who's marrying off his son Chanoch, spent tens of thousands of dollars in order to have a Sudas Nesuin, and now he's giving him the whole Suda away to someone else. Obviously, he's not interested in a serious matan. So we don't need a Lashon Tanai. We can see circumstantially through Umdana that this is what he wants to do. He really just wants to circumvent the law. He certainly is not giving away his whole Suda.